Hello and welcome to our conversation about taking steps to improve equity, diversity, and inclusion in our places of work and communities. It is brought to you by the Greater Parkland Regional Chamber of Commerce and the Community and Social Development Department of the town of Stony. Employee performance reviews are an important and useful business process and help ensure performance excellence. But they're often fraught with frustrations and can work against fairness and equity in the workplace. Defining the problem is half the solution. And in this session, we talk about some EDI problems that arise during performance reviews. The conversation takes place between myself, Mike, Renata, and Ada of BadaB Consulting. At the end, we'll also take a moment to tell you about our recognition badges that help you take steps and demonstrate your commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Now, let's get talking. To start us off, I want to talk about performance reviews in general, and then we can explore some of the equity, diversity, and inclusion challenges related to these reviews. So Ada, what do we mean by performance reviews?
Good question, Mike. There are so many versions and approaches to performance reviews, but generally speaking, we're talking about the process of, first of all, describing performance expectations and setting objectives between manager and employee. Second, we're talking about the process of documenting examples of performance. Third, comparing the examples of the actual performance with the expectations, and then providing feedback to employees, both the positive and the constructive feedback. Interestingly, different organizations do the performance review so differently. Some do it very formally and others are very informal. Some organizations will do it on a quarterly or semi-annually or even yearly basis, and others will never do it. So Renata, what have you found out about how often performance reviews are done?
Yeah, on average, about 3/4 of organizations are conducting formal performance reviews each year. The other 25% are either more often or less often. A simple takeaway from this is that most employees are involved in a performance review on a regular basis, and that means the experience and processes are not unfamiliar. But even if people are familiar with reviews, do people actually like or value performance of reviews? There are some people that enjoy them, either because they're receiving good news or because they have a personality style that highly values external recognition. But from my conversations and experiences, I find that many people do not like performance reviews, both employees and supervisors. Mike, why do you think there are often negative feelings about performance reviews?
Well, I think that some of the feelings that are negative come about because of issues like the reviews just create an atmosphere of stress, or people a part of the process might feel like they're out of touch or the reviews aren't accurate. Maybe the reviews feel formal and bureaucratic, or like they're creating extra work. But all of these give this idea that kind of negative, uncomfortable feelings about the whole process.
Yeah, I think I can relate. This begs the question, why should we even do a performance review? To answer my own question, I think the performance review serves some critical purposes. First of all, is to ensure accountability of both the manager and employee. Second, the conversation between the manager and employee is meant to help them to sit down together, allocate time to discuss the expectation and actual performance. A well-done performance review motivates employees' professional development even. And from an HR's perspective, of course, we want to make sure that there is documentation of these conversations.
Agreed. And so far, we've talked quite a bit about performance reviews as a business tool. Let's shift a bit to the EDI lens. So Ada, with you again, what are some equity, diversity, and inclusion challenges that come up within the performance review process?
Thanks, Mike. There are actually quite a few. What comes to mind are when a review is being treated like a check mark or a demand by the HR department, this can result in the absence of standards or expectations. We don't want this to happen because this would actually increase supervisor subjectivity and opportunities for biases. Some examples relate to these areas of biases are gender, when women get more negative words or the focus of their review is on the behavior than the outcomes, or race and ethnicity, where some groups are being stereotyped and seen as less capable, for example, or people with physical barriers. Supervisors ignore the mitigating effects of an accommodation or the job aid. Other issues that I have seen in the workplace can include expectations that managers have on employees are not being clearly communicated or not being well understood by the workers. Other times, office politics and favoritism can always create a bias.
Yes, and pregnancy can also be a real issue, where women are unfairly marked as lower performers because they are pregnant or needed to get back up to speed after maternity leave. There is even a lawsuit about this with Google right now, which I mentioned simply to suggest that such issues can happen in any organizations, even big, sophisticated ones.
Okay, good conversation. Let's wrap up with a few action steps related to performance reviews and EDI. Renata, what's your take?
Thanks, Mike. 2 simple things that people can do. Action 1, check in with employees about equity, diversity, and inclusion challenges they experience. We shared a few examples, and you may be surprised about what else comes up. And then action 2, do an audit or performance rating to show the distributions of ratings. This might reveal that a certain supervisor gives higher or lower ratings than other supervisors, or that some groups tend to receive higher or lower ratings.
That was a pretty good conversation. As we wrap up this session, I'd like to take just a minute to let you know that we offer a badge recognition program that is focused on supporting organizations in the early stages of action on equity, diversity, and inclusion. There are 6 badges available: leadership and capacity, accessibility, staffing, compensation, performance excellence, and learning. For each, we have a list of research-based practical indicators, and you tell us how your organization is fulfilling several of them. Then, we have a confirmation meeting and award the badge. There's lots of flexibility built in, and the point is to inform and recognize your first steps on the journey of meaningful equity, diversity, and inclusion. Contact information for Ada, Renata, and myself are on screen. Please reach out to any of us or the corporate office to talk more about equity, diversity, and inclusion and how we can help you. And thanks to our partners, the Greater Parkland Regional Chamber of Commerce and Community and Social Development Department of the town of Stony Plain, who are advocates of equity, diversity, and inclusion.